But she was very pregnant, living in a camper, and the whole family was just like, we don't want her to have the baby in the camper, like not give birth to it, but, you know.
But we didn't want that either. We wanted to make sure that she had a house to move into when we got out of the hospital. It is surgery. It's going to be surgery on your 15-day-old son.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the ADHD Eavesdrop, where you can be a butterfly on the wall and listen in on my conversations. Today, I have my son, Nate Van Stee, with us, and I'm so excited. This is going to be part of my what I call family series, my ADHD family series. And so Nate also has ADHD like the rest of our family, and if you've listened to my previous podcasts, I've already talked with his sister and his future brother-in-law, Jack. I decided to just create a family series. So yeah, Nate is an insurance person, and I'm going to let him give a little introduction of himself because he's got a lot going on.
I sell insurance. I have an insurance agency. We have 2 branches. I have a partner that I work with. I also helped start a lawn care company this year. Couple of businesses, self-employed, and yeah, that's pretty much what I do. Farmers insurance.
VanWise Insurance in Charlotte, Michigan. Give it a plug, man.
Yeah, fair enough.
I wanted to just kind of talk about some of the things that me and your sister talked about so that we could have a couple perspectives. And one of those things is what it was like growing up in a household full of people with undiagnosed ADHD.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that it's funny because we didn't really think of each other's habits and processes as all that weird because it's what we grew up with. But, you know, entering the world and seeing, you know, in a neurotypical family, you know, it was definitely different than what a lot of people experience. It was good, and we had a good support system. And, you know, I've always in my head thought that we managed pretty well, all considered. You know, it certainly helped getting knowledge and making decisions to focus on our mental health, but I think we did pretty well, really, all in all, even though we were all undiagnosed.
yeah, and life could be pretty chaotic.
Yes. I mean, we had stuff going on all the time. I mean, between me and Savannah, we probably did everything that we possibly could in a given time period all of the time. I mean,
busy.
Very busy. I mean, we both did honors choir together. We both did choir. We both did band. I did jazz band. She didn't do jazz band, but she did color guard. I was drum major.
You were in plays and musicals.
We were both in plays and musicals. I did sports. I did soccer and golf. We both worked through high school.
Oh, and she ran track.
You know, and so it's like there was a lot that we were doing all the time. And on top of that, I mean, may I mention that this might not be a perspective that you've even thought about, but you were working over an hour away.
Mm-hmm.
So from early on, we had to learn how to coordinate that chaos ourselves. You know, I mean, it was figuring out rides to things. It was, you know, sometimes growing up, I remember riding my bike to soccer practices and stuff like that when I was in high school, you know, before I had a car. I rode my bike to my first job to start working up towards a car. I think in general, we learned a lot of skills in that time period about how to manage that tough of a schedule.
Yeah, so when you hit college,
it wasn't really a shock.
A pretty hefty schedule. I had not thought about that perspective, and that's interesting. So you were kind of in training for it.
Yeah, I mean, we had a great deal of independence early on, and I think that helped us, you know, moving forward. I don't think either of us had received a really big shock going to college or anything like that. Mm-hmm. You know, we went straight into managing it.
In our own chaotic way.
You know. But
I remember the big thing in our house, and this was before any of us were diagnosed, but we knew we needed tools to help us. And we had this great big desk calendar that we kept on the wall, and everybody had their own color.
Yep.
And if it wasn't on the calendar, it wasn't happening. So everybody had to put everything on the calendar that was happening at what time so that we could look at it and coordinate it. And I think about what a great tool for a bunch of people with ADHD that we.
I mean, even now, I mean, me and my wife have a shared Google Calendar with color coding that, we do. The calendar is law. If it's on there, it's on there. If it's not, it's not. Not that we don't still discuss plans before we make them, but it is a huge tool for organizing when you can't organize. I also am very lucky to have a very organized person as a wife. I mean, she does a lot of the calendar and stuff like that.
I am hoping that she will do an interview with me because I would love to hear her perspective, being the only neurotypical person in our family, what that's like sometimes. And I know it can get pretty frustrating. It's different. Our family is different, but then we always were the family that people thought were pretty fun. So.
Yeah, no, for sure. And
very creative, musical, and artistic, and yeah, we are a very creative family if you think about it, because we've got dance in our family, we've got
lots of music,
acting, visual art, like drawing, painting.
Not my specialty, but it's in there.
No, woodworking.
Yes.
You present your creativity in different ways than an artistic, except for with your music. You do with your music.
Yeah.
That's where your art came out. Although you did do acting and
oh yeah, for sure.
And stuff.
But I felt like I could attribute a lot of that to logic. Not maybe singing, but acting. I am a very logic-based person. I mean, it is like I feel creative, but I am creative in a different way than I think sometimes creative people think about creative.
Well, let's talk about your problem-solving abilities, because you have very creative problem-solving abilities.
I mean, yeah, my mind is always whirring, trying to figure out, solutions, or, even better, my mind loves to find problems, which is fun. I like to think about what's going on in the world and try and find a solution.
You were like that as a kid. I remember when you were very young, you said you were going to invent the first hydrogen-powered car.
Yeah, I got beat to that.
Right? But the thing is even then you were thinking about how to solve the world's problems.
Oh, yes. Yeah, no, I mean, I had dreams of magnetically levitating cars powered by electromagnets and basically an intense maglev system for automobiles. And, that was... Even as a young kid, that was a lot of where it went,
But yeah, I mean, that's pretty complex.
Even now, I mean, I think of some of that creative problem-solving ability, but it goes towards different science a lot more than, when I was a kid. And those were, I guess, science problems I was trying to think about. But, I think about, I guess, numbers more. Theories on probability and on dimensions and just like furthering that understanding.
So I don't want to totally interrupt you, but I really want to say that is a huge misconception about people with ADHD, is that they're unintelligent. Right, because our family is very intelligent.
I would think so. I don't know what scale I would use, but
well, I mean, I think about your math abilities, pretty insane, and getting an actuarial degree indicates that. But just like your dad's very smart, I'm very smart. I know I'm very smart.
You are smart.
And your sister is,
I suppose,
super smart too. The thing is like numbers and math for Savannah and I are like a foreign language.
They're the language I speak in, though.
Right, exactly. And your dad and I have talked about that, about music, because you guys listen to music differently than what we do.
Yes, for sure.
And I think that music, the way you guys listen to it, is a totally different language that I don't understand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I totally get it. I mean, I hear rhythm a lot. I hear the numbers of music, the superstructure. I hear that considerably more than I hear words, for example.
I love the lyrics.
I don't know the words of songs. I barely ever, except for, I mean, the ones that you just always know. I know Sweet Caroline.
Yeah. Sweet Caroline.
Sorry.
Oh, that was
I didn't know we were going there. Anyways.
Anyway, so, it's funny because when I talk to you about your ADHD, it always turns positive.
Yeah, I think so. I think of it as a good thing. I just think of it as something that can have effects on our ability to interact with the modern world. And there are good ways and there are bad ways that it affects those abilities, but it's important to manage the bad ways in whatever way works best for you, whether it's medically or whether it is, working with intention, coaching. There is
therapy.
A bunch of different ways of doing this. I've always thought of it as a positive thing. It's just how I work. I think that there are time periods of human history it would be a supreme advantage. And just, right now I work on trying to take care of some of the disadvantages.
There you go. So it's manageable.
Yes.
Absolutely. But I wanted to point something out, and that's that people with ADHD have a higher propensity toward entrepreneurship, because we really don't like to work for other people very much.
Not really, no. Yeah, that's my personal experience.
Do you think that having ADHD has been a benefit, a drawback? Tell me a little bit about that.
I feel like it's not black or white in this situation. It's a little bit of an advantage. It's also a little bit of a drawback. I feel like being able to hyper focus on doing the stuff that I need to do to get started and actually create the business was awesome at that time. I will say that, after you get to a certain point, though, the biggest battle with ADHD in general is that, you can't get stagnant, or else you lose that interest in what you're doing. So I feel like that's been somewhat of a challenge, moving forward from there, is that it's like, you always want to work on the next thing. But I'm really enjoying this, so I haven't had to fight that too badly. I think that it's got a lot of advantages. I feel like I can do what I do a whole lot better because of it. I like the fact that I can work at my own pace, with my own hours, at a rate at which works with my brain. So I think it complements my ADHD very well. I think there are times that the effects of ADHD are maybe a negative effect,
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Tell me a little bit about your diagnosis story. I always like to have people know how we found out about the ADHD.
Fair enough. I had been seeing a psychologist for a little bit, and, we were trying to get to the bottom of things.
How old were you at that time?
24, 25, maybe. I mean, mid-20s. She had mentioned several times that she had thought that this was the case and that I had ADHD and I just had never been diagnosed, and that was some of what I was dealing with in my work life. Honestly, she was the first one to kind of bring it up in a professional setting. Although, I think I had conversations with you about it prior to that. It's just kind of what my personal feelings were. And I didn't accept the diagnosis at first and did not want to take medication for it. I wanted to, I know that that's part of who I am and that those tendencies are something that I've dealt with my whole life. Eventually, probably about 6 to 12 months afterwards, I did eventually get on medication, which has been a significant help. I think that it is a good thing. I like having the option to take it when I need to take it. It's really good for keeping me in place, but I can still use my ADHD superpowers when I need to. I don't have to take it every day, and that was something that, everyone's journey is a little different when it comes to mental health.
Absolutely. I take mine, if I can, religiously every day.
Yes, and I do for the most part as well. But, there are some days where obviously there are days where I forget it.
Right.
I'm not perfect here, but
Right.
there are days where I decide actively that, today's the day I just don't need it.
Right. And you have shortages all the time, and then
Yes.
you can't get your prescription, and so sometimes it's like right now I'm rationing mine out like every other day because I know I'm not going to get another prescription for a while.
Right.
And not because I've overtaken it, but because I messed up my appointment and forgot my appointment.
Right.
And so that was, my bad. And so now here I am stuck in this position.
Yeah, I just dealt with that last month. There was a national shortage of my medications, so I actually went like 3 weeks without medication because I was waiting to get my script filled, and it never got filled. I ended up having to change medications, but it's always a battle dealing with that kind of stuff, because it's not like it's a script that oftentimes can just run perpetually. You need to go do the things you have to do to keep your medication, but also you never know what it's like out there, whether there's going to be a shortage or anything like that,
So I'm just going to give a little aside here. I want to just mention where we're sitting and how good where we're sitting is for people with ADHD. And everybody needs it, but especially people with ADHD. It's calming. We are sitting in the middle of the Huron National Forest.
Yep.
Camping.
Beautiful day.
A beautiful lake. It's about 75 degrees. It's sunny. And we are just enjoying this beautiful day while my grandson takes a nap, and we're praying that he takes it for a while so that we can finish it. But we also have a dog running around. And so if you hear background noises, it's because we are in the beautiful outdoors of Michigan. So there's our plug for Pure Michigan.
Yes,
right there.
yeah. Go enjoy your natural resources. I think they are something that every person in America should enjoy. We have public land for the use of those,
and it's just
who live
so
here.
good for your mental health.
It is.
It is so good to get outside and get back with nature.
And there's several ways of doing it, I mean, we're sitting outside of a camper right now. I know you guys enjoy that. I sleep in a tent. I do it the cheaper way. It's really accessible. Anyone can get out into the outdoors and do it, just find a campground and a couple of friends.
Well, and with ADHD too, like camping is perfect because you can have those non-motivated days and not feel guilt, right?
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Because it's like that's what camping is for. But you can also have such a variety of things to do. You
can have a day
swim,
where
you can kayak, you can bike, you can walk, play games. I mean, it's just a plethora of things to do, so you're never bored, especially with a 10-month-old.
Yeah. Yes, seriously. With a 10-month-old, your camp is going to be very exciting no matter what. So,
yes, absolutely.
You don't always have that choice.
But you can do it. It's doable. When we talk about your diagnosis, you were then about 25, 26 when you finally started your medication.
Somewhere in there, yeah.
You've had a very amazing 2 years in your life recently.
I mean, yeah, it's been a busy few years, really, but yes.
Yeah.
I mean, the past couple years have been a lot, and I think anyone, not anyone, but a lot of people with ADHD can probably sympathize with the taking on of way too many things all at the same time and still managing to make it work. And it's very rewarding, but just in general, I started this insurance agency in 2022, March of 2022. Since then, we're in August of 2024, so a little over 2 years. We've expanded to another location. We've bought on another book of business. Through connections that I had gotten networking with the business, got a great deal on a fixer-upper of a house.
An amazing house.
It is.
How many square feet?
It's like, 6,000 when you consider the basement too.
It's incredible.
It is.
But it was a steal.
It was. Everything had to be done.
It was down to the drywall and what are the floorboards?
Basically, there had been this very large insurance claim on it, and only half the work had been done. The whole house had been completely and totally gutted down to the studs.
So in true ADHD form, you said, hey, we can do all of this,
Yeah, we can get this done.
Because we have a very handy family also.
And when we found out about the house, my wife was...
he got married in there.
I did get married in there, yes. Yep, that was also after I started the business, yep.
And that was 2 years ago.
It was 2 years ago, almost exactly. Our anniversary was on the 30th of July, so, I mean, it's been a little over 2 years.
So your wife was pregnant.
At the time that we actually got to look at the house, and we had legitimately, the day that I had gone over to look at it, her mom had come over, and we had started making up the nursery up the way that we wanted it.
At the old house?
At the old house.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
and then we found out that day that this new opportunity had come about, which was complex, and because obviously Bailey had been pregnant for a couple months already. And
so during that chaotic time, were you scattered or were you like super hyper focused? Where were you at?
So I think it really depends on what time period you're talking about specifically. So at the very beginning, when we found out about the house, things were definitely a little more scattered because it involved a lot of waiting on other people to do things. I had to list my house. I was at the same time opening a second location, doing all the stuff that I had to do at the very beginning. And then on top of that, I'm working with the bank to figure out a very specific kind of loan to take on this project because we needed money to do the repairs to the house.
Right, it wasn't habitable.
Exactly. It was just kind of a process that, and really all that didn't end until like July. So, there's a little overlap, but in June, sometime around even a little before that, it was like the end of May, I was able to get into the house and start working on it, even though we hadn't transferred ownership. We'd reached enough of a formal agreement for me to start getting in there and working. And then that really worked with just being able to move things forward. I had to prime that whole house, and it has, in some spots, legitimately, in the middle of the house, the ceilings are near 40 feet tall.
Yeah.
In the central area of the house.
I know when you got a hold of that house, when you got access to that house, I am 100% certain that your hyper focus kicked in.
Yes.
And you were, well, we all were. We were out at your house all the time, just like
plugging away.
And so, with all that organization, you get the business, you've got so much going on. How did you prevent yourself from becoming too overwhelmed? Because with all that going on, a lot of people with ADHD find it very difficult to function.
I think it's a good support system, first of all. Having people around me that were so invested in the success of what was going on in that moment. There was so many people who wanted to make sure that all of this could work out, because everything that was happening in that moment was an incredible opportunity. So I feel like my support system and my team really kept me, centered. For the stuff that I couldn't do, were there to pick up the slack on that kind of stuff. I have a great business partner, James. He handles operations on a day-to-day basis when I'm not available, which is more often now. He's starting a second business and having a baby now. So he's always on top of it, and I do the same for him. But it's really great to have that kind of person for those situations. I feel like I could always rely on my wife. She was very pregnant, so I wasn't like I was relying on her to do much of anything around the house.
She was a high-risk pregnancy.
She was a high-risk pregnancy.
But she was directing traffic.
She was, and she arranged a whole day. A bunch of our friends came out on a weekend where I was actually out of town, and while I was
part of that group. Yeah.
You were part of that group, and I had gotten all this priming done. That was like my thing. Like, I had some help from a couple key people within my friend group. Shout out to Aaron Green for basically priming my basement. I came back and a lot of painting had been done. Like a lot of painting. And that was a huge help. And she just directed all of that, made all of that happen.
So did you feel like you were able to organize things? Because there was a lot to be done.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like it would, I wouldn't say a struggle, but yeah, I guess. Did you feel like it was kind of a struggle just figuring out how to manage all of it?
Yeah. So I started with a binder. This is something I do with a lot of projects when I'm working on them. Just a regular 3-hole binder, and then some college ruled paper and some graphing paper. Mm-hmm. And I just organized the entire house project within that binder. All of our ideas, all of our receipts, all of our, to-do lists, all of that stuff. The binder was law. I had the floor plans and everything. Did you set up the binder
yourself, or did Bailey help you?
No, I actually set that one up myself.
You go, man.
I know.
Awesome.
It was necessary at the time. I needed to get organized. And because it was such a major project, I took some serious time plotting things out, using my costs. I did several Excel sheets about budgets and so many different things that I had printed out and they're available so that when we had a question, the binder was in the house. Mm-hmm. So if something needed to be referenced, I didn't need to go chase it down. I was able to just access my binder. I used my hyperfocus to kind of make that. But because you don't always have access to your focus, right? By making something, manufacturing something in prep work with your focus, you can really help yourself out later. You don't have access to it. I have been saying consistently over the past couple of years, pretty much everything in this world, whether you succeed or fail, is going to be based on prep work and how well you did your prep work. If you set yourself up for success, you're going to be able to get it done. But if you don't do a little bit of prep work, you're going to have a whole lot harder time.
And the prep work for some people with ADHD is so tough to do. And
it is so hard.
Well, others will spend all their time prepping and never get to the task. So there's finding that balance and being able to prep just enough.
I kind of had a forceful nudge from life in that direction because, I had timelines.
Mm-hmm. You functioned very well during this time. I don't know ultimately I felt like you handled it very well. And I think it was because you had timelines, you had task lists, you had everything. Like you said, you had the groundwork and everything was set. And it was just a matter of pushing forward.
Yes.
And so, I know the work on the house has slowed significantly.
Well, yes, in some ways.
For obvious reasons. But do you think any of that has to do with the fact that the urgency isn't there?
Oh, for sure. There's an urgency quotient with everything. Getting everything done in the time frames I had to get it done was a huge pusher and good for me to have that. We have the house we have currently not 100% completed because of that, and
we got a lot done, though.
We did. We got a lot done. We went from basically drywalls that weren't framed. They'd just been sanded. So all the rough-in was done, but none of the finish was done. It has been a process, but there's still so much more to do, and I definitely feel like it's harder to get that stuff done now that the timeline has.
There's a new baby in the house too. It's more interesting.
I have other things. I have other things to do.
There.
2 businesses, and I've got all of these things to do. So it's to a certain extent, it's always the next thing on the list.
Right.
I don't feel like I ever stop moving, but sometimes getting back to the project is tough when I have a never-ending list. I think you have to pencil in some time for yourself in there too, or else you go crazy and burn yourself out. I've done that. I did that through this process a few different times where I just did a real hard push for a few weeks, and then I was just burned out. I had nothing left in the tank.
In the process of doing all of this, you sold your house. Mm-hmm. And you moved into the new house, but you couldn't live in the house because it wasn't habitable yet.
No.
So you moved into...
A camper.
A camper.
Yes. With my 8-month pregnant wife.
It was on your property.
Yes, it was on the property. My grandparents were very gracious and let us borrow their camper for a few weeks for us to get a few things that had to be done before we could get in there.
You had essentials that you had
to get them done.
Get taken care of. So you move into the camper. Now, my question is this.
Yeah.
We both know that part of your ADHD is your ability to organize your items and put them away.
Yes.
So you move into this 30-foot camper with your 8-month pregnant wife. How did your ADHD affect that situation?
So I gotta say, it's one of I think probably the happiest that portion of my brain has been, because it was very minimalist. We only had so much stuff that we could really have in the camper. It's hard to disorganize a small number of things. It's, when you add in all the other stuff. That being said, all over the rest of the property was and still is. Chaos. I have a pole barn still full of just stuff that has to be gone through. I have rooms in the house in the basement that I still have boxes for moving. I'm still going through totes of stuff because I have this thing that I do where when I am done with a project, for the most part, it goes into a miscellaneous tote. All my tools and stuff from that project. And then that tote just gets full of this random stuff that I then have to go through and sort later. And I have like 4 of these just floating around right now, full of tools and materials that I need to go through and sort. But, that is not the stuff that makes my brain go.
There's not much of a dopamine hit with that part. And I know a lot of people with ADHD don't finish a lot of stuff. Well, they think it's finished before they put everything away.
Yeah, right.
It's how to shift your mind to think that cleaning up afterwards and putting everything away is part of the project.
And my compromise has been putting the things into a box or a tote. Well, and that's, it's not a full win, but because I have so many things I'm doing and so many times I'm just pushing forward, it's hard. It is really hard to just stay there and reorganize everything back to where it was supposed to be.
So you got an 8-month pregnant wife, living in a camper.
Yes.
ADHD's not a big problem because you don't have much stuff going on.
I mean, not much stuff in the camper.
Right, exactly.
But stuff going on everywhere.
Exactly.
Because it was kind of a fun experience, I think, for both of us, even though she was very pregnant.
Well, so let's talk about that a little bit because your poor wife...
Yes.
Lives
very pregnant.
We'll talk about this a little bit more because I really want to interview her. But she was very pregnant. She's living in a camper, and the whole family was just like, we don't want her to have the baby in the camper, like not give birth to it, but
but we didn't want that either.
No, we didn't want that either.
No, we wanted to make sure that she had a house to move into when we got out of the hospital. So, the first night that we stayed there was the night we came back with our baby. That was the first night we actually stayed in our house. So just barely made that deadline.
She left the camper to have the baby. She came home to a house.
It's true. First person to actually stay there was her mom, who was in town, for the baby. Because it was a planned C-section. So we knew the date. He hadn't turned. So it turned out later we found out he had the umbilical cord around his neck, and that's why he hadn't turned over, which actually ended up working out because we had deadlines, right? And I knew, we had the birth date of our son. She had 5 days in the hospital with the C-section, and I was there every night to take the night shift with Killian. Every day I was going back home and working on the house, making sure it was ready for when she got there.
I was pretty much there working the whole
yeah, pretty much, time, yeah. Pretty much. And you and Denise were both, which is my mother-in-law, both of you were in and out amongst that as well, helping keep us sane. So it was quite the process. I mean, we barely made the deadline of getting into that house with a baby. But we did it. And then we stayed there for a couple of weeks, like 10-ish days. Before Killian,
I think he was home for 8 days.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, which means because he was like 13 days old. So basically, Killian just got sick, and we were first-time parents, and it was a couple weeks into being a parent. So everything's
just over a week of being at home alone.
Right, exactly. I mean, you just kind of everything's freaky, so you don't want to overreact, but. He was just not right. He wouldn't eat, and he was throwing everything up. Which, it's normal for babies to spit up and be fussy, So, from that aspect, the pediatrician, didn't want us to worry, all these things. She said, he seemed fine.
His vitals were good.
His vitals were good, But she did say, that's the most I can really do here. If you want him to be more looked at, you can take him to the emergency room and just, have him do a workup on him. So, left that appointment, and we made an appointment at the emergency room, which is a great advent of the 21st century, not having to wait in line. We knew our time, and we arrived. We were able to, eat lunch, because I wanted to make sure she had some food in her, because she was worried sick. And I was like, I don't know how long this process is going to be. So we got there, and
at this point, we thought stomach bug.
Yeah, we thought he was sick, and it's still scary for a 2-week-old, but, we got him in there, and all of a sudden there was a bunch of doctors that were taking it very seriously. They were thinking bladder infection. They took a sample of his urine, and they found that it was cloudy, so they thought, bladder infection. They immediately got him on antibiotics. He was spiking a fever. He just wasn't looking good. He was, they were taking it seriously because they don't like their temperatures to be out of range when they're that young. So we knew from the beginning, they had basically told us, with everything that's going on right now, you guys are going to be here the night, at the very least. So we were prepared for that, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, that he vomited one time, and it was blood.
The dreaded coffee grounds.
Yes, it looked like coffee grounds. We didn't know what it was at first, but of course, Google. I was able to figure it out pretty quick. The nurse came in, and at that point, things started moving very, very quickly. He was moved to the NICU very shortly after that. Because he had been moved into, this baby's very sick. Mm-hmm. And we spent that night up with him because he was puking up blood every 30 or 40 minutes.
So then you had to go home to get some stuff for you guys so that you could stay the night.
Yes.
And I came up to be with Bailey at the hospital.
Yes.
And when we were there, Bailey felt something in his stomach, and she said, Mom, let's feel this, and said, can you hear that? And it sounded like a whooshing sound, and it felt like a whooshing sound, and it was loud, and it felt like you could feel something moving in his abdomen. So we asked the nurse to feel it, and she said, well, I've never felt that before. I don't know what that is. We wanted to get the doctor down there, but the doctor couldn't come down, so the doctor did come down after I had left.
Mm-hmm.
And then she, called in 2 more doctors, right?
Yeah, so basically, there was a doctor who was called in, and she didn't really know what was going on. But it became quite clear that we needed to get a GI guy. I'm not going to try and say that name right now.
Gastrointestinal.
Thank you.
Yeah.
They needed to get a GI doctor in to start figuring this out. And he wasn't going to be in for another 2 or 3 hours. Because at this point, it's like 4 o'clock in the morning or something like that. So basically, it was sit tight. He'll be on the docket first thing in the morning. And they gave him some anti-nausea medication to hope that he would stop vomiting, which did help him get some sleep. But all this is very scary at this point because we don't know what's going on. He is in a box, basically, a heated box. And we really can't do much with him. It was very worrisome. It wasn't like we could just cuddle him or anything like that either. The next day, they took him down for an x-ray because they wanted to see what was going on in his stomach. So they made him drink a dye that they could see in his stomach, and then did an x-ray and found that he had a very, very large hiatal hernia.
That he was born with.
That he was born with, and there was nothing anyone could have done, but basically,
So explain what a hiatal hernia is.
So you've got your diaphragm that pushes your lungs, right? And that's the muscle that makes you breathe. And that's kind of a membrane that keeps your lower stomach and guts away from your lungs and heart.
Upper guts.
And upper guts, sure. Basically, that diaphragm has a little hole in it where your esophagus goes through and into your stomach. And what had happened is that hole he was born with was much larger than normal. And his stomach had come up above his diaphragm. It was around 80% of his stomach was in his chest cavity. Things weren't getting through anymore. There was this small passage of stuff getting through. So that's how they knew that, weren't super afraid about like organ die-off or anything like that at that moment, because they was like, okay, it's obviously stuck here and stuff is having a hard time getting through. That's why he's vomiting everything up, but things are still getting through. So, okay, at least we know what's going on now. So, what do we have to do?
And we can't do it here. There's only 3 hospitals in the state that'll even try it.
Exactly. Like this is going to be a pretty major situation. And they got on the phone with those 3 hospitals, and, the first bed that opened up was at DeVos in Grand Rapids, which was not our first choice. Our first choice was U of M.
Mott.
Yes, CS Mott. And because the surgical team at Sparrow that had diagnosed this and had gone over the initial consultation were also U of M surgeons. But they couldn't perform the surgery. They didn't have the necessary OR in Lansing. So basically we were getting ready to go for Grand Rapids, and then finally a bed opened up at U of M and CS Mott. So we took that.
I came back to the hospital.
Yes. And then they were getting us prepped and letting us know that they were going to airlift our son in a helicopter to U of M. And, we obviously no one was going to ride with him or anything. That was all scary. But he ended up not being able to go in a helicopter because of the weather. So they took him by ambulance.
And I followed.
Yes, my wife, Bailey, rode in the ambulance with him, and then you followed, and I went home to pack bags for what is
at least a week. They said
at least a week. I was prepped for 2 to 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. It was starting to get to the point where it was like Ronald McDonald House was starting to get a hold of us to try and figure out space for us to stay at, so we didn't have to stay at the hospital. But we just stayed at the hospital. I mean, it was like, I can't imagine leaving him in that situation. But
and then I called somebody that I hadn't talked to in years.
It's true.
But who is a wonderful friend of the family, and I asked her if I could stay with her for a night in Ypsilanti, and she said, stay as long as you want. So I moved in for a week, and I was able to be there with you guys.
Yes, which was very helpful. And also, Denise was...
And Denise came.
Yes, she was there as well.
And your sister-in-law.
Yes.
Bailey's sister. Because
they were in Detroit, so it wasn't too far for them, to begin with. Yeah, I
left your poor dad at home to deal with all of this by himself.
And
poor
here
Papa.
he is working on the house. That is...
Right. And for the record, right now, Papa is playing with this little guy. So it's a good ending to the story.
Yes, it is a good ending to the story. I remember him when I came home that night to pack bags, and I was giving the update to everyone, because everyone was, at the house. They had been working, Sam and Jack had just gotten home, and they were just putting their bedroom together, because they had just gotten back home from Tokyo.
Yeah.
And so... Yeah, I came back, and, everyone, it was like, it was still like, oh, he's in the emergency room, okay, he might have to stay overnight, but it wasn't like, no one was really freaking out yet. I remember Dad being very strong, and being like, they're being extra precautious, and I was like, I had not gotten to the part yet. It was like, right before I left, he had vomited up blood, and it was like, I just had to be this person, and be there, and tell them that, this is what was happening, and, whatever we were dealing with had turned very serious, and it was going to be a process no matter what. And so all these people are now left there working on the home, just absolutely terrified. We all were, but it was an incredible support system of people. It all worked out. We ended up having to be at the hospital for
7 days, I think.
Yeah, it was less than 10, I feel like.
Yeah, but it was pretty touch and go, because then they were going to wait until the next day to do his surgery.
Right, yeah, we gotten in that night. So this is about 24 hours from when we first had gone to the hospital. We're at CS Mott. We are in an open wing of their NICU where we have a bed. We don't have a room.
We cannot say enough about CS Mott.
They did amazing. And from there, we eventually, the next morning, got moved to a room in the NICU. So we didn't have just a bed for long. But, we did have that for a while. And then the surgical team had a meeting that morning about his case, which, by the way, turns out had been the worst hiatal hernia that any of the doctors had seen in an infant ever. More reminiscent of
this whole thing in the first place. You have a 0.04% chance of being born with it, right?
Yeah, it's a very
handful of babies,
and usually it's a small hiatal hernia, and it's,
they ended up opening them all the way up.
Yes, they tried to do it laparoscopically, and they couldn't. They ended up there ended up being a small tear in the stomach when they started trying to pull it through the diaphragm. So they actually had to open him up fully, and this.
Well, it's a good thing they had to too, because they didn't realize the extent of it until they got in there.
No, I mean, it was bad, but basically the surgical team had met that morning, and they had gotten some updated X-rays that they had acquired, and they found out that at some point between when they took the X-ray in Lansing to us arriving, that all flow had stopped, and he was no longer able to pass anything through his stomach, and it was a complete blockage. At which point they're immediately concerned that it's twisted, that, there's a possibility in that case of, if blood flow doesn't get to parts of the organ, you can have parts of the organ die off and have significant tissue damage. So, he was pushed forward to emergency surgery.
That moment in the hallway. I will never forget the moment in the hallway. Nate and I were headed out to go for a walk, and the surgical team, the whole surgical team, was coming down the hall, and they stopped and said, "You're going to want to come back." And my heart just dropped. I was terrified, because we were thinking it was going to be hours before the surgery, if at all that day. And
it might be the next day. He's stable. He's, he's doing better.
And then all of a sudden they're like, "We're taking him now."
Yeah, and it's like, we've bumped everything, because, this is imminent at this point. And that's a pretty scary situation to be in overall.
And then, do you want to hold him one more time?
Right, exactly.
Like, oh, God, just tear my heart out.
And of course, this whole time he can't keep anything down. He can't eat anything. This baby is hungry. He's tired. He hasn't been sleeping well. And he's very upset and just wants comfort. And he's connected to so many tubes and wires.
So when they took him down, you guys kind of went off and did your own thing for a little while. And we went and waited. The surgery was about, 5 hours?
I think it ended up being closer to 6 when it was all said and done.
Okay. So 6-hour surgery later, they bring this little 14-day-old, 7.5-pound baby out of surgery with tubes and shit all sticking out of him.
Yeah.
And they say he's going to be okay.
Yeah. We basically just get a text that says, "Come down." It doesn't say how the surgery went or anything like that. It's just come down and talk to the doctor. So we went down. Everyone's terrified because we just got a text that said, "Come down." I mean, we don't know what that means. They don't know what that means upstairs. We get down there, and I remember looking at him and seeing a very tired man. I mean, because at this point it was 5 or 6 at night, it was probably about 5. This had been more than half his day was prepping for and doing a very intense surgery that he had. He'd done hiatal hernias before, and he'd done hiatal hernia.
He said it looked like what he'd seen in the vet hospital, right?
Yeah,
like something you see in a 90-year-old man.
Right. It was, and it was just something no one had ever experienced in a baby.
So the next day when I talked to the surgeon, I asked him, "What did you think when you saw what was in there?" And as it turns out, the flow had stopped because what was left of his stomach had twisted and gone up into the bottom of his esophagus. So I just shook the doctor's hand and I said, "Thank you for saving my grandson's life," which is not something you think you're going to have to say. I said, "But maybe because we felt it and we heard it, we'll be able to help other kids that have it because they'll know what it is when they see it. And he laughed and he said, "No, this is never going to happen again.
Yeah.
This is one for the books. This is a one-timer." And I was just like, "Oh, okay."
It was, a very wild situation, and I'm very glad and grateful for all of the doctors, nurses, and staff over at CS Mott for everything they did, and it's at Sparrow and Lansing. I mean,
they got him where he needed to go.
Yes.
They knew they couldn't handle it and got what they
immediately.
needed.
And that was just the whole time I felt like I was in good hands.
And then he had a feeding tube for 6 weeks.
He did have a feeding tube.
Because they had to tack his stomach to the side of his abdomen because they couldn't close the hole all the way up.
No.
And you can't mesh a baby.
Correct. Yeah. So they needed a way to make sure that it was going to stay in place for the healing process at the very least. So all in all, the feeding tube was, we got
Never
used to it. Yeah, we got used to it really quick, but we never really had to use it.
Yeah. And now he's almost ready to walk, and it was amazing. And so, I love that story. I think it's amazing, and it just makes me so happy every time I talk about the fact that he made it through, and he's such a wonderful boy now.
He is.
I know we got off topic on our ADHD.
It's true. What did you expect?
But sometimes that happens because we have ADHD. Nate, I want to thank you for coming on and chatting with me today and talking about all of this stuff, the ADHD and the story with Killian, because I, love that story. And I hope that maybe sometime you'll come on again for my family series. I love this family series idea. So thank you.
Yeah, of course. I'm glad to have been on, and can't wait for the next time we get to do it.
Awesome. And in the meantime, if you enjoy my content or if you like what you're hearing, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you next time.